My day started by microwaving the T-bone steak that I had left over from the night before. It wasn't the most exciting meal to begin the day with, and microwaved steak probably isn't anyone's favorite food. I was still looking forward to it though. I microwaved it and placed it onto the table and only turned my back for a second to grab a knife and fork. But that's when my dog pounced. He jumped up onto my chair, grabbed the steak in his salivating mouth before jumping back off the chair and running outside. I chased after him, but already most of the meat was taken off of the bone and he was beginning to dig a hole, presumably to bury the bone. That's how my morning began. My breakfast getting stolen by the dog, and I hate to tell you, but my day only got worse from then on. At work, I got yelled at by my boss because of a small accounting error. I somehow typed in the wrong number into the computer and ended up losing the company $350. Now I work for a large company, so I didn't think this would be too much of a big deal, but apparently, my boss feels differently. After work, when I returned to my car, I found that my car had a smashed passenger window. At first, I thought maybe my car had been robbed, but I searched through the glove box in the back seat and couldn't find anything of value missing. I thought it might have had a comb sitting in the back seat that was now missing, but at least I still had my stereo and a $50 note that I accidentally left in the glove box. You might think that my bad luck would end there, but no. When I got home, I checked my letterbox and found that I had an overdue power bill that needed to be paid in the next week. By the day from hell, I just needed to relax, so I decided that I would do what I usually do after a long, stressful day. I would go onto my computer and try and find a new and exciting game to play. One of my hobbies is to play different games on the internet. I usually just play whatever fun game that I manage to find, the more challenging the better. So, I fired up my computer and began my search through the web to find a new and exciting game to play. I had already clicked through a few websites when I clicked on one called amateurscavinger.com. It sounded interesting, and once the website loaded, a small window popped up that read, "Do you have what it takes to be the next amateur scavenger? Get all of the items on the list and win a life-changing prize. Once you have won the scavenger hunt, you won't believe the person you can become." At this point, I was intrigued. Maybe I did have what it takes to become the next amateur scavenger. I clicked on the button that read Begin Scavenger Hunt, and once I clicked on it, it took me to another page. On this page, there were 3 options to choose from: easy, medium, or hard. Next to easy, it said that the prize money was $100,000. Next to medium, the price amount was $500,000. And next to hard, it said that the grand prize was the staggering $1 million. Now, I was very interested. This was indeed a life-changing prize if it was legitimate. I did have my doubts about whether or not this hunt would actually pay out like it said it would. I decided that I would play, as long as I didn't have to enter any bank details. Of course, being someone that likes a challenge, I chose to go for the grand prize, and so I chose the hard difficulty. Once I clicked on hard, it took me to another screen where I had to fill in basic details: name, phone number, which state I lived in, and what my fitness levels were like. I was a bit skeptical, but filled in all my details anyway. As soon as I had finished entering the details, I heard a smell ding come from my phone. I picked it up and saw that I had a text from an unknown number. The text read, "Welcome to the Amateur Scavenger. I admire your courage in choosing the hardest difficulty. If you are successful in finding all of the items, you will receive the prize amount of $1 million. A new you and a new life is only a few missing items away. Best of luck. You will receive further instructions and your first missing item shortly." Accompanying the text was also a photograph, and when I looked at it, it was a picture of a very large pile of cash, and in front of it was a small wooden sign that had my name and today's date written onto it. This is how I knew that the prize money was real, and it gave me a sense of excitement knowing that I may be able to win this amount. Nothing happened for a few minutes before I heard my phone ding again. It was another text, and this one read, "For each item you must find, You must send a photo of the item to this number. There may be some special items that require you to drop them off at a particular location that will be later specified. Once you have completed the list, you win the money. Failure to find all the items in a certain time limit will result in your disqualification. The first item that you must find is one toothpick. You have 5 minutes. I read through the message, and once I read that all I had to find was a toothpick, I thought to myself, this most surely gets harder, because 2 minutes later, I had taken a photo of a toothpick I had found and sent through a message to the unknown number. Almost immediately after I had sent through the photo, I received another text which read, "Congratulations, you have found one of the missing items. The next item you must find is a coin that is at least 30 years old. You have 10 minutes. At least this task is a bit harder, I thought, but it was still fairly easy. I managed to have the photo of a 37-year-old coin I found in an old piggy bank sent off within 7 minutes. This continued for the next few items. They would tell me what to find, and I would find it quite quickly. I had found a phone case, a chipped cup, and an unusual salt shaker, all with relative ease, and had sent a photo of each to this number. Each time I had a little bit longer to find the item, but I managed to find them all well within the time frame. After I had sent off the photo of the clown salt shaker I inherited from my grandma, I waited patiently for the next item to be sent to me. Showing off only a moment later, I heard my phone ding again, and I read the text message I had received. "Congratulations, you are now almost finished at the scavenger hunt. Only a few more items stand in your way of $1 million. The next item you must find is the bone that your dog buried in your garden this morning. You have 3 minutes." As soon as I read this, I began to feel panicked. How did the game know about the dog bone? Had someone seen the dog take the bone? Surely not. How could they have seen? This didn't make any sense. I didn't really know how to react, but all I did know was that I only had 3 minutes to dig a top if I still wanted to win this money. I had a decision to make. Should I continue playing this strange game and try and win the money? Or should I just stop playing now? After quickly thinking about it, I decided that I would keep playing. I tried not to think too much about it and instead headed out to the backyard. I looked around for a recently dug hole, and I soon found it. I dug through the earth with my bare hands, and only a few inches deep, my fingers touched a bone. I quickly poured it up and saw that it was the bone from my steak that morning. I quickly took a photo of it and sent it off. I wasn't sure how long it had been since I received the text message, but I hoped it hadn't been more than 3 minutes. I soon received another message that read, "Well done, but you only just found that one in time. Try and be quicker this time, because this is a special item. Your next missing item is 25 milliliters of your blood. You have 30 minutes to have the blood delivered to the post box that is at the end of your street. Good luck." After reading this message, I was very worried. Why did they want my blood? Why did I have to deliver it to the post box? These were questions that I wanted answers to, but I knew I probably wouldn't get. I knew that I wanted the money, but did I want it bad enough to extract some of my own blood and place it into a post box for anyone to retrieve? I don't really know what led me to this decision, but I did decide to continue the game and to deliver the blood. I knew that I now only had 20 minutes to complete this task, and so I quickly went into the kitchen and found a small jar in one of my cupboards, and then went to a drawer and pulled out a small knife. I stared at the knife for a moment, knowing that I needed to make a cut on my finger and fill the jar with the blood that came out. The only thing was, would I be able to actually do it? I thought about the $1 million and decided that it was worth giving myself a small cut for that amount of cash. I psyched myself up and made a small incision along my index finger. Blood instantly began to emerge from the wound, and I managed to begin to fill the jar. I didn't really know how much blood 25 milliliters was, but I kept on filling the jar until I was satisfied with the amount. I quickly pulled out some kitchen scales to weigh how much the jar was, all while being conscious of the time. The scale read 140 grams, and I was pretty sure that the jar would have been around 100 grams, so I was confident that there was enough blood in the jar. I quickly picked it up, screwed the lid onto it, and ran down to the post box. I probably only had a minute or two left now. On the way out of the kitchen, I managed to grab a tea towel to place it around my still bleeding finger. I sprinted down to the post box, and when I got there, I quickly took a photo of the jar in front of the post box before placing the jar inside. Seconds later, I heard my phone once more. It was another text message. It read, "Good job. You now only have 2 items left to find. Please step away from the post box and return home. Once home, you will receive your next item." This is when I realized that someone was probably watching me. How else would they know that I was still at the mailbox, and how would they know once I returned home? I knew at this point that I didn't want to finish the game, but I wasn't sure if that was an option. I quickly walked back home, looking from side to side to see if I could see anyone, but I couldn't. Once I got home, I got inside, and as soon as I turned to the key to lock the door, I heard the ding of my phone once again. I read the text message that I had just received. "Now that you are back inside, you can receive the next item. You must find a bruise on your boss's face. You have 12 hours. This one really peppers me. Why would I need to find a bruise on my boss's face? I knew that he didn't already have a bruise, and so I knew that in order to complete this task, I would need to inflict one. I had already come to this farm with $1 million. I wouldn't need to work at that company anymore. This is what I found myself thinking as I was driving to work the next day. Did I really punch my boss in the face though? I questioned whether or not I could, but deep down, I think I had already decided that I could. I had left for work early that day and tried my best to arrive at the same time my boss did most mornings. I knew that he often arrived before most of the other employees, so I knew that if I was going to punch him, then this would be the best time to do so. I pulled into the car park at my workplace and saw my boss's car already parked there. I pulled up next to his car and saw that he was still sitting inside the car. I unstrapped my seat belts and hopped out of the car at the same time that he did. He saw me, then greeted me with a nod and a smile. I didn't hesitate. I ran straight up to him and swung my fist towards his face. My fist, connected with his nose, just below his eye. He dropped to the ground and suddenly, and blood emerged from his nose almost immediately. "What the hell did you do that for?" He yelled at me while he was lying on the ground, obviously in pain. I saw this as I was already beginning to bruise slightly, and so I quickly bent down, took a photo, and sent it to the unknown number. I then decided to get back into my car and drive off quickly. After driving for only about a minute, I heard my phone ding. I pulled over and read the text message. "Great job. You now have one final item to find. You must find yourself. You will be back at your workplace. You have 3 minutes to find yourself." I was very confused at this point. Find myself? What did that mean? Is this some sort of joke about self-discovery? Is that what it had been all about? I didn't hesitate though, and I soon had the car turned around and heading back towards my workplace. Once I got there, I saw that a few other employees had arrived, and they were standing in a circle looking down, horrified. Suddenly, I saw someone run out of the circle of people, and I saw that lying on the ground was my boss. A large knife was embedded into his abdomen. What was pouring out onto the concrete of the car park? This isn't what horrified me though. What frightened me was the man that had just been running away. It was me. I know that it wasn't actually me, but it looked exactly like me. They were wearing the same clothes as me and had the same haircut as me. They were my exact double, almost like a clone. Obviously, all the employees would have recognized that it was me, and so I quickly turned my car around and sped off, not wanting to be seen. Then, I heard my phone ding, and without stopping the car, I read the text message. Congratulations, you have completed the amateur scavenger hunt. You managed to find yourself, and so your prize money will be delivered to you shortly. I hope it was worth it. I was only 8 years old when the first present arrived. It was Christmas morning, and I had awoken early to unwrap my presents. Mom and Dad had been grudgingly gotten out of bed, sacrificing a sleep-in to watch me excitedly open the presents that I believed were from Santa Claus. One thing that you should know about me is that I used to love dolls, and I wanted to collect all the dolls that I could. I really had a very large collection: big dolls, small dolls, almost every single doll you could think of, I already had. So, as you might expect, all of the presents that I received that Christmas morning were related to dolls. I got doll clothes, doll hats, doll accessories, even another doll that I didn't have yet in my collection. I loved all of my gifts, and I thought I had unwrapped them all. Until my dad went outside, and then quickly came back in and asked my mom, "Funny, do you know what this giant present outside is?" He asked, sounding a little concerned. Concerned that either Mom didn't know anything about it, or that she did, and had spent a little bit too much on it. My mom responded that she didn't know anything about a giant present on the porch. Had I thought so, then I thought, and went back outside. When he returned, he was holding a fairly big rectangular box that was wrapped in bright red paper and had a sizable golden bow on top of it. "There's a small note on it that says it's addressed to you, darling," the dad said while he was looking directly at me. "So, I guess you better open it." He handed me the large red box, and I nervously took it from him. It was quite weighty, which made me even more curious as to what could be inside of it. I slowly tore off the bright red wrapping, and even slowly revealed what was underneath. I saw that underneath the wrapping was a purple box with the words, "Life-size human doll," written in sparkling silver cover. Maybe these were the words part 1 of 6. In the middle of the box was a see-through plastic sheet that allowed me to see inside. Inside was a plastic arm that was human-sized. It had a human-sized plastic hand and a plastic arm that went all the way up to the shoulder. At the shoulder, there was a large plastic knob that looked like it would attach into another socket that would be a part of the doll's torso. There was no other part inside the box though. There was no torso to join it onto. I guess this is why it was part 1 of 6 though. The rest was probably yet to come. I looked up from the gift I had just received and saw the look on both of my parents' faces. They both looked concerned, but also a bit surprised that someone had dropped off a present for me, and they knew that I had a bit of an obsession with dolls. My dad then studied the small note that was left on the box, and he looked at it for a moment with a puzzled look on his face. "It signed your secret Santa, so I really don't know who that could be," he said, sounding confused. A year passed, and the large doll arm was set in my room for the entire year. I think my parents kind of forgot about it, because it wasn't really mentioned since January. I know that you're probably thinking that we should have been more concerned about this mysterious present, and you're probably right, but I think we thought it was just something harmless. And when I received another present the next year, it became almost like a Christmas tradition. On Christmas morning the next year, I got up early again and opened my presents. Those were still of big interest to me, because I wasn't quite as engrossed by them like I was the year before. I still received a number of doll-related items from Santa Claus, but I also received a few articles of clothing and a necklace or two. It was a fairly normal Christmas morning, and my dad even joked about finding another present on the front porch, like we did last year. As he made this joke, he turned and looked out the front window, and I could tell by his face his joke had just come true. He went outside to grab the large rectangular box, which was wrapped in the same bright red wrapping paper with the golden bow on top to match. He brought it inside and read the small notes that were attached to it. "I hope you enjoy part 2 of the Christmas gift my dad read aloud from your secret Santa." He read the note aloud, trying to sound excited about the gift. As even at the young age of 9, I could sense confusion in his voice. I was confused about these gifts too. I think we all were, but yet we still didn't try and find out more about them. We just accepted them. I think my parents could see that I got excited when I received these presents. I did get excited though. It seemed like someone was doing something very nice for me, and it did make me feel special, and I think my parents could see that. After Dad had finished reading the notes, he handed me the large box. I must have had a big smile on my face when he passed it over to me, because as he did, he also began to smile. I think I had secretly hoped that another present would be said to me. When I had grabbed the presents off of my father, I felt that once again it was quite weighty. I excitedly peeled off the wrapping paper and saw that it was another box of the same purple color as the previous year. It had the same sparkling silver writing that read life-sized human doll. I looked through the clear plastic that was on the box and saw that it was another doll's arm, the same size as the previous year. That's what I expected, but now I had one question. What would I receive next year? I had to wait the entire year to find out. I thought about it quite a lot. Finally though, Christmas morning came around once again, and this time when I got up, I went straight to the front window and looked out at the front porch. Sure enough, sitting on the doorstep was another large box, covered in bright red wrapping paper. I immediately noticed that this year, the box was a bit larger than it had been the previous years. I didn't wait for my parents to get up this year. I unlocked the door, went outside, and pulled the box inside. It was heavier than the previous years, so it was harder to pick up. Once I got the box inside, I began to unwrap it. When my parents got up that morning, they found me in the lounge, sitting next to a large box that contained one long doll's leg. I don't think they were surprised to see it. They almost expected it, just like I did. By this point, it was definitely becoming a tradition. Christmas morning meant the next piece of my life-sized human doll would arrive. I won't ask me if there was another note attached to this year's gift, which there was, so I read it aloud to both my parents. Half the doll is yours, half of it is mine, 3 more pieces and it will be ready to combine. From your Secret Santa. The doll's leg was then added to the small collection that was growing in my bedroom. I now had 2 doll arms and 1 doll leg. All that was left to arrive was another leg, a torso, and of course, the head. I thought that the next year would see the arrival of the other leg, but that year, a package didn't arrive. On Christmas Eve that year, I had a plan. I really wanted to know who was dropping off these gifts, and so I decided that it was a good idea to wait up and watch out the window for the night, just to see who was dropping off my gift. I snuck out of bed once I had heard my parents turn off all of the lights and had gone into their bedroom. I quietly crept past their room and went to the door and waited for my Secret Santa to arrive. I waited in the lounge whilst staring out of the front window directly at the front porch. The later the night got, the longer the night dragged on. I persisted though, even when I felt my eyelids go heavy and all I wanted to do was sleep. I managed to stay awake, waiting and watching. Nothing arrived though. No one came up onto the porch to drop off a present. A quick look outside on the porch and around the house also confirmed it. No present was delivered that year. My parents seemed confused that no package arrived. They were just expecting it now. I never told them that it was because I'd stayed up all night watching. I definitely didn't tell them about the notes that I found in the garden the next day. The note that read, "He sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake." Of course, the note freaked me out a bit. I guess I just decided that the Secret Santa had arrived at my house to drop off the next installment of my gift, but must have seen me peering out of the front window and so decided to leave and not drop off the present. I guess it was because I was younger, but I soon forgot about the whole note and life continued on as normal. Soon enough, it was Christmas time again, and this year I knew that I would go to bed. I didn't want to risk my present not being delivered once again. I slept well that Christmas Eve, and the next day when I got up, the first thing I checked was the front porch. Sitting there, once again on the doorstep, was another large box with a large golden bow on top. I brought the box inside, finding it easier this time as I was now a bit older and could lift a little bit more. This year, when my parents got out of bed, they found me with another box containing the second leg of the doll. They almost seemed excited to see it, like they wanted there to be another present. They both smiled when they saw me with the purple box. I now had 4 parts of the doll. I knew I only had 2 more to go. I did spend a lot of the next year wondering if the next part would arrive the following Christmas, and I wondered if it would be the head or the torso. My questions were answered on Christmas Day that year when I saw the box sitting on the front porch. It was the biggest box that I have received so far, so I knew what it was. It was the torso. I had to ask my dad to help me carry the box inside. This gift was the heaviest and did require the 2 of us to get it indoors. Once inside, I tore off the wrapping paper to reveal the large rectangular purple box. Inside the box, I could see it was a human-sized doll torso. It had sockets at both of the shoulders and also at the hips. I knew that this was where the arms and the legs would connect. I could now begin to build my doll. I also read the note that was attached to this year's gift. It read, "For years now you have had to wait, but the doll is now ready to begin to create. From your secret center." Now, as I had the centerpiece of the doll, I could begin to build it, which is what me and my parents spent a lot of that Christmas morning doing. It was the first time that I had opened any of the boxes, and I remember the strong smell of plastic that would enter my nose every time I had opened a piece. I opened the torso box first and managed to drag it out onto the lounge floor. I remember the feel of a rubbery plastic when I first touched the doll. All of the pieces felt the same. I remember the feeling I got when I managed to slide the leg into one of the hip sockets. The way it clicked into place was extremely satisfying. It took maybe an hour or 2, but once it was finished, there stood the doll. The box was correct. It was definitely life-sized. It stood about the same height that I was at the time, and I was still missing one crucial piece, the head. I knew that I still had another year to wait before I would receive the final piece of my doll, and so I anxiously awaited its arrival for the entire year. I remember in the weeks leading up to Christmas, I was very excited to receive the final package. I don't think I slept that well the night before Christmas, and I definitely got up early that morning. I ran outside to the porch, and sure enough, sitting on the ground was a smaller square box wrapped in bright red wrapping paper and a golden bow. I picked it up. It was lighter than last year's gift, and I bought it inside. My parents had gotten up at this point as well. I think they were eagerly awaiting the present too. Once the present was inside, I saw open the wrapping paper. Underneath, I saw straight away that it was the doll's head. It had long blonde hair, a well-pronounced jawline, and a small petite nose. It had a pretty face, but one thing that took me aback was the doll's eyes. They seemed so lifelike. Like they were staring straight at me with a look of fear in them. I didn't dwell on the eyes too much though. I only wanted to do one thing. I wanted to attach the head to the rest of the body, and then my doll would be complete. The rest of the doll was now in my bedroom, where it had been for most of the year. So I ran to my room and saw what I needed to screw the head onto the rest of the body, which I did. The doll was now complete. She had her head, and so I now owned the complete life-size human doll. I had already dressed the doll before the head had arrived, so she was already dressed up in a bright red dress and a pair of golden high heels. Now that the head was attached, I thought that she looked beautiful. That's what I thought every time I looked at her on that Christmas Day. That's what I thought until I went to bed that night and found that she looked like she was staring straight at me with those haunting eyes. I didn't sleep well that night. Over the next week, I did begin to sleep a bit better, but there was still something about those eyes. They looked like they were just watching me. They looked like they were calling out for help. I had to keep reminding myself that it was just a doll because of how real they looked. I did eventually get used to the presence of the completed doll in my room, and it was probably about a month later when the doll became a comfort to me. I think that eventually I got accustomed to the doll sitting in my room staring at me while I slept. I think I began to like it. That was until I accidentally left the candle burning. One night in late February, I lit a small candle and left it on a chest of drawers in my room. The drawers were right next to the doll, right next to its face. I think I got distracted by something out in the kitchen. Maybe I did or something, I can't quite remember. What I do remember though was the sight that greeted me when I returned to my room an hour or so later. I walked in and saw the doll. Its eyes still looking like they were staring at me in horror. But what frightened me the most is the bottom of its face. Right near where the candle was burning, the bottom of the doll's face had begun to melt away. Big blobs of plastic were forming and then running down its face, then dripping off of its chin. Most of the bottom half of the doll's face was now melted away. A large gaping hole was present where the plastic used to be, revealing a very real set of teeth underneath and a very real human face. I never screamed so loud in my life. The sight of the doll's face melting away and the sight of the real face underneath was too much for me to handle. My parents say that they found me frozen in terror in my bedroom. The police were quickly called once my parents had seen what had made me freeze in fear. The police took the doll away, and all that I know is that a complete human body was found underneath the doll. It was encased entirely in plastic and was sculptured to resemble a doll. Police say that the body was still well preserved because it had been coated in a thick layer of plastic, and that the person whose body it was had been dead for around 7 years. To this day, I am still haunted by the thought of the doll and the fact that it lived in my room for so many years, but it used to watch me sleep. I'm sickened that I used to enjoy putting it together. Sometimes when I wake up during the night, I swear I can still see the doll's eyes staring at me, crying out for help. What frightens me the most, however, is what the police found underneath the final box that I received. Consented on the bottom of the box are the words "Limited Edition 1 of 12. I got my PhD from the Stockholm Royal Institute of Technology and finished my postdoctoral work at the University of Bern in Switzerland in 2015. I won't go into detail, but my work is centered around electromagnetic disruption and practical electromedical application. Professors are that if you check Google Scholar for these keywords, my name will pop up as a co-author on at least one of the top 5 results. However, in early December of 2016, I was in an accident. I was staying overnight for a conference in Copenhagen, where a colleague of mine had rented a large apartment. However, due to an electrical error, there was a heat buildup in the main water heater, causing a steam explosion. I was sleeping pretty much water war with it. My face and shoulders took the main brunt of the boiling water, steam, and pressure. The last thing I remember seeing was a bright light, followed by a sudden and complete darkness. I had to go through evisceration and enucleation of both eyes. I lost 8 teeth on the right side of my face and most of my nose. At least 20% of the body fat in my right arm was burned off. The reconstructive surgery of my face took a CT team of surgeons for 18 hours. This was followed by months of just trying to survive, moving back in with my family, and going through cosmetic surgery mainly for my face. To this day, I still have no idea what was said at the conference. After a few months, I was fitted for double-eye prosthetics. It took a total of 3 months before I was given enough of the option to sort therapy. I'm not going to lie, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Most people who are legally blind can still perceive some kind of light, but complete blindness, about 7% of us, is one step further. One day I'd be suicidal and the next I was determined to learn Braille. Because of the damage to my eyelids, the surgeons opted to connect new tear ducts to my nose. So crying just made my nose runny. 3 years later, I was in a much better state of mind. Although sudden blindness isn't something you ever really adapt to, I was doing better. I still wasn't ready to go out on my own, but with a friend, no family member, just to help me along, I could go pretty far. I also learned to appreciate all those weird accessibility options that come with most computers. You have no idea. In the autumn of 2019, I was contacted by a man who told me he represented a group associated with renewable energy research. Living in Sweden, renewable energy is a big deal, and it's something I've personally been interested in. In fact, I was going to be the subject of my next article just before the accident. The man offered me a job. He told me that he had a lab that worked with disabled scientists and that my expertise was in high demand. The pay was more than generous, and as a benefit package, I would be given a personal assistant. Pay for an off-site 2-bedroom apartment was also part of the benefits. I agreed to have an interview. The man who was going to interview me was clearly from another country, but he was ready to fly out to meet me at short notice. He came to visit the very next day. We had a private conversation at my parents' house. He asked me a lot of questions about my work, and I could hear him tapping away at a touchscreen. We discussed some of the details, but there was one thing he consciously seemed to avoid: where the main lab was located. He seemed uncomfortable talking about it, but he promised that I would be given a private flight wherever I wanted during downtime off-site. There would be 4 weeks of work on-site, living in the apartment outside the main lab, followed by 2 weeks off-site, kind of like a paid vacation. I would be in rotating shifts with one morning, midday, evening, and night shift. The weirdest thing was revealed just as I was about to accept the offer. Every single scientist at the main lab was completely blind. I accepted the offer. The next week I was picked up by the same man, let's call him Samuel, and taken to a private flight. I still had no idea where we were going, but other passengers were speaking in an Asian language in the news. You know what I think? On the flight, I was introduced to my personal assistant, Mila. I think she was an Australian. Mila was a darling. She knew exactly what to say and when to help me, but most importantly, she knew when to give me space. It was as if she could read discomfort on my, albeit reconstructed face, and just acted on it immediately. She must have had a lot of expertise working with the visually impaired. My first few days were mostly orientation and introductions. I would be working with a team of 2 other scientists and 7 assistants, 2 each, 1 general. Apparently, our personal assistants would not be available while in the lab, but they would be on call as soon as we went off-site. They would also help us with cooking, cleaning, whatever we wanted. It was a big operation, a total of 40 people just in the main building, all completely blind, at least 100 others. While the pain we were getting in the benefits, this was a very expensive project. We're talking millions, possibly tens of millions. My team would be working with material research. As Samuel explained, they were developing a new type of material as part of renewable energy tech. They weren't completely clear on the possible end results, but the metal we would be testing was told to be unique, extremely valuable, and uncomfortably bright. Apparently, it could cause blindness during prolonged exposure, which was why the main reason they put together a team of blind scientists. During my first day at the facility, I was given plenty of time to adapt. The other members of my team were just as new as I was, but we were given radio instructions on how to move through the various corridors. There was a decontamination room without protective suits, and we were told to follow guiding pipes along the walls. On the left were cold pipes, on the right were warm, 3 pipes on each side, leading to a total of 6 rooms. The pipes had square, circle, and triangle engravings, making it easier for us to find our main room. We were Team Worn Triangle. The work itself wasn't that bad, mostly just repetitive. The test object was isolated in a separate room, but we would check it through samples, material exposures, and readings. We were all given separate workstations and hearing equipment, so we could isolate the sounds of our specific assistants, and just to make sure our computer equipment wouldn't read over one another. We had buttons on our headsets to adjust who could listen in and to mute certain sounds. It took a lot of time to adapt to it, though we were at least 50 codes to memorize. I got to know my assistants fairly well. There was Aaron, an American, and Holger, a Norwegian. They were both older than me, and both had master's degrees. They were quick to follow directions and equally quick to offer suggestions. I could tell they were having some authority issues, but they didn't make it a problem, and the first 3-week-long shifts were fine. We went from midday to evening to night. The night shift was, of course, the toughest. By now, I was getting to know the place and routine. I had noted a few things during my testing, but also just from the context of what was being talked about in the facility. The 7th assistant would come down with lunches for us, and we ate in a small common room, warm circle, where we would talk more freely about what we'd learned. We never changed from warm trying with our main room, even when we changed shifts. Well said, that was weird. The material was extremely reflective. From the way it was tested, it seemed rectangular in shape and thin. My colleagues talked about it possibly being similar to a pane of glass. The material had several strange properties. It would absorb light, but dissipated it almost instantly. It would, to some degree, also absorb electric energy, low-level radiation, and radio waves. I'd never seen anything like it, if you pardon the expression. By chance, we also discovered a peculiar feature, the object by now called the pane. Briefly absorbed sound waves and would reflect it back after a few seconds, like a delayed echo, but slightly distorted. Kind of like it had been run through an underwater filter, bouncing between sheets of metal. If I said hello, I would hear a clear but lower hello, right back after about 8 seconds. This being despite me standing no less than 10 feet away from the object, it made no sense. Once during the night shift, Holger fell ill. It wasn't bad, just a light case of pneumonia, but the company had a zero-tolerance policy for sickness in the workplace. He got the week off at his apartment, and I had to work with one less assistant. It delayed my progress somewhat, but Aaron was eager to make up for lost time. Too eager, it turns out. On the second to last day of the night shift, Aaron accidentally calls to power outage. We were pressure testing the object and Aaron slipped and knocked over some volatile materials at another workstation. Nothing happened explosion-wise, but the entire room went into immediate lockdown and the power was shut off. The door is shut and locked on the outside. I didn't notice the lights go out, but I could feel the room quickly growing cold. It occurred to me that the object was probably absorbing the warmth, and there was no climate control to compensate anymore. Then, something weird happened. We were all sitting quietly, our headsets being turned off, and waited for the power to come back on. That's when I heard something. Hello. It was the same off-putting, distorted voice that I thought was a delayed echo. One of my colleagues, Gertrude, responded with a hello right back. I heard 4 quick footsteps, like the start of a drum roll, and something slamming into the glass separating us from the object. Something squishy. Hello. Now we stayed quiet. The footsteps came in quick bursts, pacing back and forth, looking for weaknesses in the glass. We usually used small airlocks to put in samples to test. We had 2 airlocks, and the leftmost one of these was attacked. I could hear something rattling the airlock trying to rip it loose. Hello. I could hear the grinding sound of metal being bent. I pressed myself against a wall, holding my breath. The power came back with a vengeance. My headphones were full of people screaming. Evacuation protocol initiated. Proceed to, get out, get the heck out. All triangles respond immediately. I repeat, half the voices were in a foreign language. We ran for the door. I didn't need to follow the pipes to get back to the decontamination room, but only then did I notice we were 1 person short. We'd lost Gertrude. Once outside, we were separated and isolated. Standing outside in freezing temperatures, I was stripped naked. Several people, all screaming in a foreign language, lifted my arms and legs and checked me from my feet all the way to my hair. I was forced into a plastic tent where they shaved my head, forced my mouth open, and checked my teeth. My ears were cleaned with some sort of antiseptic, and my eye prosthetics were discarded completely. It was quick, violent, and terrifying. I was locked inside my apartment for the rest of the night. Tyler came around to help me, but she told me that she was instructed not to talk about my work under any circumstances. That's when I first suspected that my apartment was booked. I spent a week in that apartment with daily checkups. I felt fine, but the entire ordeal was stressing me out. Having my head shaved was uncomfortable, and I was scared they might find something they wouldn't like. After that 1 week, I was suddenly told that it was necessary to terminate my position. I didn't recognize the voice of the man telling me this. I was given 4 months of full pay, an apology, and non-disclosure agreements, and an immediate flight back home. Mila was holding back to years trying to help me pack. She seemed frightened. I've been home ever since, but I come to you to share my story. I've been doing my best to stay financially independent, but life hasn't been treating me well. I'm still having stress reactions, and there's been a recent development that I don't know how to deal with. Last night, as I was brushing my teeth, the power went out. I could hear the air conditioning and dryer suddenly go quiet, and the entire room felt colder. Except for the bathroom mirror, which radiated a slight heat. I stretched my hand out to touch it. This might be hard to understand for someone who doesn't think about their sense of touch too often, but I've touched that mirror every night for years on end by now. I know exactly where my hand was in the space of the room, and there was no mirror where my hand was. Still, I touched it. Every part of my finger touched something extruding from the mirror's surface, something with rounded edges. Then, it made a sound. Hello. My name is Mark, and I run a small YouTube channel where I buy old appliances, fix them up, and sell them at a profit. I run it with my wife, Jane, to supplement my income, and even though I only have a few thousand subscribers, it's a very rewarding experience. I'm a repairman by trade, and Jane is a sanitation worker, so we see things discarded all the time. You'd be surprised how little hassle tolerance people have. They're so quick to discard anything and everything. So fixing things up and seeing people getting spied by my work has been what got me through the COVID pandemic, or at least it was, until recently. It was our first time buying something from out of state. We'd heard about a large sale just a couple hours drive, where we could get a whole haul of appliances for cheap. It was the owners of a combined restaurant/bed and breakfast who were selling off pretty much everything, as the building was being torn down. They weren't going out of business or anything, but they'd figured they'd get rid of some of their older stuff in the move. Mostly refrigerators and dishwashers, but also a sink or two. I'm an amateur plumber, at best, but you shouldn't underestimate the price you can get for a fancy sink. We drove up with a trailer and started elbowing our way forward. There were at least 2 other crews there, along with a dozen cars from curious passers-by. We'd gotten there just before 10 a.m., but a lot of the yard was already picked clean. The kitchen stuff was completely gone. What remained were mostly washers and radiators. Sure, there was plenty of furniture and knickknacks, but that wasn't what we were there for. If you've got a niche channel, nurture it. As one of the other crews got away with the last industrial-sized freezer, I found myself looking over the washing machines. Most of them were really new and in perfect working order, but there was one that stood out. It had a small note attached to it, simply reading useless and a smiley face. It was a pretty standard machine, probably from the early 2010s, but it was completely black. The plastic had been chipped and the front hatch was completely broken off. Jane checked it out. It was perfect for the channel. The owner practically gave it away. Apparently, the thing came with the building was already broken. They hadn't cared enough to just throw it out, so they did put it in storage. The thing hadn't worked in over a decade. So I figured I'd have a lot to do. Still, it looked sleek, and after fixing it up and adding some detailed work, we could probably make a nice profit. The color underneath the grime was stunning. Solid black. Beautiful. We also got some smaller appliances for cheap. a cyan-colored 6-sliced toaster, a retro-style microwave, and a blender. Had we known there'd be so few things left, we would have skipped the trailer. We hosed off the washing machine, loaded it up, and put the rest of the smaller appliances in the back of our car. When we got back home, I did a quick checkup on the washer. I usually do a pre-recording check just to see if it's something I think I'll be able to fix. Most of the damage seemed superficial, and I figured I could fix the hatch with the new 3D printed spare pieces. Jane figured she could do something about the color and add some fancy details. In the right room, it could almost be beautiful. Heart appliance, heart art, deco centerpiece. I spent a week fixing up one of the toasters for a shorter video while we prepped the work on the washer. I was having a busy week at my day job and was fully booked from Tuesday to Thursday, so I didn't have much time to spend on the channel. Fixing up the 6-slicer was a good middle ground, and it turned out great. We decided to keep it, but figured we could probably get at least $100 to $120 for it. Once I signed off the initial recording with the usual like and subscribe stick and got to the editing, I was suddenly excited to get started on my next big project. I had a good feeling about the black washing machine. We could make something good out of it. Jane helped me finish the editing on the 6-slicer, and we got back to work. We started filming the following week. I did the thing where I pretended the washer was donated to us from a fan and that I'd never seen it before. Then we opened it up and checked the interior. I hadn't actually checked the interior that closely before, and I noticed some glaring issues. There was a lot of gunk clogged up in the inner pipes, and the inlet's connections were rusted straight through. The agitator was a bit loose and there were cracks in the outer hub seal, but the water pump was flawless. I was afraid we'd have to order some special replacement parts, but we got away cheap. I had most of it in stock, or could get it from the hardware store. The thing would be a cakewalk. Over the following days, I made a list of what needed to be fixed, and we filmed it in short burst sessions. We usually just make sort of a montage with some insights along the way for commentary. We talked more about the process rather than the details, but this time we made extra effort. The whole video would probably clock in about 30 minutes. Step by step we fixed it up, and the 3D printed replacement parts for the front hatch fit great on the second print. The lock worked fine, and there were no leaks in the outer hub or the inlet connections. I got away with using the replacement parts one already had, so we finished it in about 3 days. Jane was trying her best to find a color that matched the original black, but she was having some trouble. We couldn't find what type of color it was from the manufacturer, as this model wasn't sold anymore. It was a Canadian brand from Newfoundland, and I couldn't help but wonder what kind of trip this washer had taken to end up in the backward of Michigan. I fixed up the chipped plastic edges with a lot of heat and a lot of sandpaper, and I noticed that the black color seemed to get more intense the deeper I worked the plastic. I showed it to Jane, and she was as confused as I was. We decided that instead of repainting it, we would just go over the plastic thoroughly with sandpaper and more heat. It was surprisingly easy to work with, and the layer underneath was just solid jet black. Jane worked on adding some Art Deco style flourishes with gold spray, while I fixed it up with some LED lights for the buttons. We prepared for the first test run. We set up 2 cameras and put one of my old t-shirts in the washer. I put it on a low temperature quick wash. We immediately noticed something was wrong. The first thing was the noise. It made a low rumbling noise, like there was a strong electric current running through it. Every 4th second I could hear a gulping sound, like the water was coming in waves. It was a weird sound to hear from the washer, almost like it was regurgitating the water. The biggest problem came soon afterward. The water was completely black, like ink. The program ran longer than expected, and when it finally finished up, my t-shirt was completely black. Not even gray or some other discoloration, but completely ink black. We filmed the entire thing, and it made for a pretty decent scene. My surprise was genuine. We ran a second test, thinking we got the gunk out of the pipes, even though I could have sworn I already had. We ran it again, this time using one of my boxes as a test subject. Jane made a joke about them needing a wash anyway, as we watched the washer fill up. Same gulping noises, the same rumbling, and the same inky black water. My boxes were rendered completely black. I spent the next 2 days trying to find the problem and running various off-camera tests. Every time I'd get the same results, rumbling, gulping, and then the black water came. I tore the thing apart looking for the cause, but couldn't find anything. By this point, even if there was something clogging the pipes, it should have washed out. The first weird thing I noticed about the machine was when I checked the water coming out of it. It wasn't black, there was nothing wrong with it. It was just black while still in the machine. I was at a complete loss for words. There was something that filtered the water coming in, making it black, and something that filtered it going out, making it regular again. It didn't make sense. There was nothing in the machine that could have caused that kind of effect. I even checked the tubes again, but there was nothing. While running test 14, I put in an old pair of jeans, only to realize my old wallet was still in there. There was nothing in there except an outdated idea and some membership cards, but still, I didn't want anything to get stuck in the washer. We waited for the program to run its course, and unsurprisingly, the jeans were rendered completely black. Impressively so. That's when I checked the wallet. All my old cards. Black. This is when I figured something wasn't right. Jane and I decided to pause the recording while we figured this out. Over the following days, I tried replacing several parts, only to get the exact same result. Gulping noise, black water, the whole shebang. I also noticed that the spray-painted details that Jane added slowly started to peel off with every wash, as if the color itself was rejecting it. We tried adding it as plastic decals, paint, spray, but it all just withered and fell off. My LEDs even stopped working. I noticed the washer ran really hot when used, like really hot. The plastic was so hot that I could press my hand against it and see the plastic bend to the outlines of my hand. The metal parts in the back were hot enough to fry an egg. Still, I didn't use that much power. It didn't make much sense. We measured the power using during the low-intensity program, and it was surprisingly low. Lower than most eco settings on modern washers. I mean, if it wasn't for turning clothes black, it cleaned them really well. By now, I was having a hard time understanding what was going on. One night, while Jane was cleaning up the dishes, I fiddled around with one of the black cards I'd gotten from the washer. The black had soaked into the plastic. It wasn't just a coat of paint. An idea struck me, and I went to my computer. The card had an RFID chip, and I wanted to see if it still worked. I got my reader and blipped the card against it. My computer screen instantly blacked out. It wasn't just the screen though. The entire computer turned itself off. It started to smell like burnt plastic, and I stepped away. A few seconds later, a black ooze started pouring out of the DVD tray. The graphics card fan was going crazy, making a high-pitched noise like it was going to explode. Jane freaked out and got the fire extinguisher. I was just frozen. That computer set me back about $1,800 2 years ago, and now it was just sitting there, fuming. My files were backed up on an external drive, but I wouldn't be able to render or edit my videos for a while. I didn't even know what to say to my followers on Twitter. The whole situation was absurd. I just stood there with my black card in my hand as Jane drowned the computer in foam. Jane and I had a long talk. I wanted to get rid of the washer and just not think about it anymore, but Jane figured this could be a break to something bigger. We decided to try things out and keep filming our attempts. Instead of giving up, we doubled down. First, we checked out the manufacturer and sent a few emails. Apparently, they had never sold a black version of this model of washing machine. It was supposed to be eggshell white, and a few were mint green. They'd never sold a black one though. The customer service people were happy to help us out. They seemed a bit curious themselves, and they asked for the serial number. They told me where to find it. Once I knew where it was easy to spot. It was 8. Just 8. That was the serial number, just an 8. I had to send a picture to the customer service rep just to prove I wasn't joking. They had a really hard time believing me. They'd never seen anything like it. Meanwhile, Jane was trying to wash different things. Blankets, pillows, sheets, they all turned into a solid, unified black color. Complete coverage. As a joke, she tried putting in a teddy bear. It didn't just turn black. All the small plastic parts of it did as well. The eyes, who were small white plastic beads originally, were completely black. Even the stitching and when checked, the fluff. Every single part of the teddy turned completely midnight black. The eyes didn't even reflect light anymore. They turned matte. Exasperated, Jane put the teddy away and threw in one of her old flip phones. I tried to stop her, but she was getting frustrated. There has to be some sense to this, she said, some purpose. We stood next to it during the whole program. Gulping noises, rumbling, black water. Once the hatch clicked open, we picked up the old phone. It was surprisingly intact. Solid black all the way through, but the screen still worked. All icons were nameless, along with the background. Jane shook her head. Apparently, the phone hadn't been charged for years. It shouldn't work, but it did. Later that night, just past 2 a.m., I was woken up by a strange sound. It sounded like some sort of bell, but as if run through an underwater filter. It was clear, but haunting. Jane woke up just as I got up. She asked me what the hell was making that noise, and I didn't have a good answer. There were black footprints in the hallway. The teddy bear was gone and my wardrobe stood wide open. Every single black t-shirt, my black jeans, black boxes, it was all gone. Pillows, sheets, blankets, everything gone. The footprints were leading me straight to the washer. The sound was coming from the old flip phone, lying on the bathroom tiles right next to the washer's hatch. A drowning ring signal. I bent down to pick it up, but recoiled. Something inside the hatch was moving. I stumbled my way out of the bathroom and fell backward. My eyes were fixed on the hatch. It opened. A black hand reached out towards the phone and pulled it into the washer with a snap. The hatch shut and clicked. Jane rushed out with a flashlight. The hatch was lit up. Empty. Empty, but there was still something there. I knew it. Something was staring straight at me, and it was angry. We had threatened it, trying to repair it away. This was a way of showing that it was ready to defend itself. I could still hear the wailing bell noise from the phone echoing through the pipes. The next morning we threw the damn thing away. Jane wanted to destroy it, but I couldn't work up the courage. We got rid of it and hurried back home. The black footprints were still imprinted on the floor and we had cleaning to do. Once we got back home, I started scrubbing the floors. Jane called me over. At the end of the bed was the black teddy bear, resting comfortably. I don't know what this is or what it means. Is this a warning or a peace offering? Should I get the washer back? I'm at a loss. And Jane is starting to have panic attacks. The footprints just won't go away. Sometimes I swear I can still hear that drowning bell. It's coming yet.